The Sioux City Strangler woke up around 7 a.m. feeling a chill in the air. He pulled the blankets on the bed up to his chin and smiled, thinking of his night with Sherry and the drunk at the bar and the dinner date on the books for that evening. He drifted off to sleep again, thinking of the warm plate of spaghetti, maybe with meatballs, that awaited him. At 9 a.m., the Sioux City Strangler stepped out of the shower and dried off leisurely, dripping warm water onto the commercial carpet in his motel room. He'd already turned the TV on, but he wasn't really watching. It was just background noise as he got ready to start his day. Dressed in jeans, brown boots, and a heavy cream-colored turtleneck sweater, the Sioux City Strangler stepped out of his room and into the center courtyard. As he opened the heavy door to the outside world, he was hit with a gust of cold wind. A light dusting of snow coated the ground now. He thought of Sherry and her body in the tall grass and smiled. Nobody would find her for weeks if it started snowing. After going back to his room for a coat to layer on top of his sweater, the Sioux City Strangler fired up his Pontiac and pulled out onto the busy street. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but he knew what he was going to order when he got there. He felt like pancakes, bacon, eggs, toast, orange juice, and black coffee with milk on the side. This is the story of the Sioux City Strangler, a man who terrorized the great state of Iowa for nearly 10 years before making his way to California for a little fun in the sun and a fresh crop of citizens to terrorize. I'm your host, Mary Buckley, and you're listening to Sioux City Strangler, the podcast. An elderly woman with long gray hair and blue cat-eye glasses led the Sioux City Strangler to a brown booth at the Weiss Choice Diner. He'd asked for a booth when she tried to put him at the counter. She rolled her eyes, but obliged. Her shift was over in 5 minutes. He'd be Lorraine's problem soon. As he sat down, the woman pulled a pencil from her hair and spoke in a gruff voice. "Know what you want, hun?" The Sioux City Strangler smiled. "I do, actually." He rattled off his order. The waitress smiled. Maybe he wasn't a pain in the ass, she thought. He just knew what he wanted. She could dig it. "Okay, sweetie," she said. "We'll try to get that out for you fast. Sounds like you're hungry." "You know I am," he said, showing off his 100-watt smile. Lorraine, his new waitress, introduced herself and dropped off his coffee, followed by a half-dozen plates of food a few minutes later. He ate quietly, reading a newspaper he'd bought on his way into the diner. A few refills later, every bite of food he'd ordered had been eaten. He left cash on the table and walked out the door with an unlit cigarette between his teeth. The Sioux City Strangler thought of going to the mall to do a little more shopping, but he didn't want to run into Maria. A chance encounter in the parking lot or a run-in as she walked through the Sears department store and made her way to the Harvest House wouldn't be good for him. He kept driving, looking for something to do with his day. He passed a movie theater and pulled in, scanning the display board to see if there was anything worth watching. There wasn't. Back out on the street, he went west, stopping only to fill up his machine. Making a big loop back to the motel, the Sioux City Strangler figured he'd just go to his room and turn on the TV. Maybe he could catch an old western or something. Maybe he'd take a nap and rest up for what was surely going to be a big night. A few blocks before the motel, though, the Sioux City Strangler spotted a neon sign, dark in the sunlight but still visible from a distance due to its size and unique shape. He drove toward it, parking in a spot near the door. He lit a cigarette and strolled inside. A kid that couldn't have been more than 18 was behind the desk at the pin spot. He had a Coke in one hand and he was spraying disinfectant into a dozen pairs of bowling shoes lined up in a row on the red speckled Formica counter with the other. "Got any lanes?" asked the Sioux City Strangler. The kid looked up from his spraying and saw the physically imposing yet friendly-looking man standing there, smiling with a cigarette in his hand. He scanned the bowling alley with his hand over his forehead as if to shield his eyes from the sun. The bowling alley was empty except for 2 elderly men throwing gutter balls and chewing on cheap cigars. I guess we can fit you in. We're down to our last 30 lanes or so, though, so you better get one fast." "Okay, kid," said the Sioux City Strangler. "If it's not too much trouble, I'd like to throw a few games. Give me the heaviest ball you got. I'm out for blood." The kid laughed and took a big gulp of his Coke. "Okay, mister, you need shoes or you going barefoot?" Shoes. Definitely shoes. Size 12. The kid let out a low, impressed whistle. You got it, pal. Just don't damage the pins. They're not used to it around here. Take any pair that looks good to you, he said, pointing at the row of shoes between them. They're all good and fresh. The Sioux City Strangler grabbed his shoes off the counter and waved at the kid as he walked away. How about 15, he asked, raising his voice to a near shout. 15 is haunted. Try 16, said the kid. 16, yelled the Sioux City Strangler. He stubbed out his cigarette into the silver ashtray and sat down and swapped out his shoes. He rolled a strike for the first frame, and the kid behind the counter yelled, "Give 'em hell, boss!" startling the old men at the far end of the alley. After throwing a few games and smoking half a dozen cigarettes in the process, the Sioux City Strangler returned his shoes to the kid behind the counter. They saluted one another silently, with straight faces, holding back their laughter. Back at the Lamplight Inn, the Sioux City Strangler undressed and got back in bed. It was about 1 now, and there were soap operas on TV. He didn't much care for soap operas, but he watched with the volume low as he fell asleep. Waking up around 3 p.m., the Sioux City Strangler hit the vending machines again for a few pre-dinner snacks. Another bag of Ozark barbecue potato chips and a Clark bar would hold him over until it was time for dinner. He washed it all down with a Coke as usual. The Sioux City Strangler watched a few hours of TV, alternating between lying on the bed with his head propped up on a pillow and sitting in one of the chairs by the cafe table. He did a few push-ups and a set of jumping jacks to get his blood flowing before getting in the shower around 5:30. He took his time getting dressed, carefully shaving and applying English leather aftershave. He dabbed a touch of English leather cologne behind his ears and on his wrists, too. Dressed in brand new underwear and a recently laundered shirt, the Sioux City Strangler put his plaid suit on and zipped up his dress boots. He headed out at 6:25, lighting a cigarette as he pulled the door to his room shut. He stopped by the front desk, and the man who had checked him in was sitting in a lounge chair reading the paper. "Know where I can get some flowers around here?" asked the Sioux City Strangler. "This time?" asked the man, looking like he'd been asked if it'd be okay to kick his dog. Yeah, not for next week. Florist's all gonna be closed right about now. You gotta get a jump on that earlier in the day." "I see," said the Sioux City Strangler. He looked straight ahead at the man without blinking, blowing smoke out his nose. You could probably get some chocolates or something at the drugstore. They're open till about 8. "Thanks, pal. That's why you're the boss around here." The man smirked, but the Sioux City Strangler didn't see. He was already halfway out the door. We'll be right back after a word from Fresh Fare Delivery.
Cooking can be a real drag when you're tired. You can't spend big bucks eating out or ordering in every night, though. Keep it simple with Fresh Fare Delivery. Your ticket to better meals in minutes. Ready to heat and eat, our pre-cooked meals are delivered packaged in disposable plastic containers with plastic silverware, so there's never a mess when you're done eating. All our meals are made to go in the microwave too, so you can have something tasty ready to eat in under 3 minutes. We've even got family plans, so everyone in your household can enjoy Fresh Fare Delivery. Use code STRANGLER today to get a free chicken a la king added to your first order.
An extra-large box of chocolates under his arm, the Sioux City Strangler knocked gently on Maria D'Angelo's door. She called out to him, telling him to hold on just a minute. When she opened the door, she was wearing a black dress the Sioux City Strangler couldn't help but notice. Her hair was different than how it had been that day at the Harvest House, too. He held out the box of chocolates as he took his first step inside her apartment. She smiled, but looked a little concerned at the same time. It was a little early for gifts. "My mother told me never to show up empty-handed, and I guess with Christmas, this was the only box I could get at the drugstore. Consider it a Christmas present, huh?" This explanation made her feel a lot better. He hadn't gone out to buy a huge box of chocolates for a casual first date. It was just all he could get at the one place he stopped. "Want a glass of wine?" she asked, leading him into her apartment and toward the kitchen. "Don't mind if I do," he said. "2 sugars, no cream," he added. "Silly joke," she said, laughing out loud with her back turned, pouring the wine into a heavy red glass. She brought it over, and they just looked at each other for a moment before she broke the silence. Well, I better finish cooking the spaghetti, she said. The meatballs are almost done too. You seemed like a meatball kind of guy. You calling me a meatball? Look, I may not be as slim as I was in high school, but geez, a meatball. She rolled her eyes and smiled, tilting her head to the side a little. Just have a seat, she said, pointing to the small 2-seat table with the blue tablecloth. Won't be more than a few minutes, then you can see how you feel about spaghetti. Oh, I think I'm gonna like it, he said. I've got a good feeling. Maria brought the Sioux City Strangler a heavy plate of spaghetti with meatballs, topping the whole thing with a generous helping of Parmesan cheese. She refilled his wine glass and went to fix herself a plate. As it turned out, Maria was an excellent cook. Her mother, who had been born in Italy, taught her how to make all sorts of things, from classic spaghetti and meatballs to more extravagant dishes like ossobuco, ricotta pie, and of course, chicken marsala. She even had a few dessert recipes up her sleeve, she said. Wow, I never learned to cook anything. My mother wasn't much of a cook, he said. No? You look like you grew up all right to me, she said, a little more flirtatious now. Yeah, I did okay. Mom didn't make any homemade meatballs, though, if you know what I mean. A lot of hamburger and rice. That doesn't sound great, she said, laughing a little, but making a face that said she was sorry if he'd had a rough childhood. He said, I made it. Maybe Mom's cooking prepared me for the army, although some of those guys could really cook. Oh yeah, she asked, happy to be changing the subject. I figured it was a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and bowls of wet beans for you guys. Well, yeah, there's some of that. And when you're out in it, you know it's even worse. I wouldn't wish army rations on you, Maria, he said, cracking a smile. But when you're somewhere with a real kitchen like a base and the guys have the ingredients, man, they can turn out some serious stuff. I mean, some of these guys could make a perfect steak with one hand and be working on a pie crust with the other. No, she said, that's wild. I wouldn't have thought that. Yep, you know, so much of the army is about being good at one thing. You have a job and the guy next to you has a different job. A lot of the time, those jobs are very specific. The guys that cook a ton, lots of meals every day. It's good practice, I think. So what was your specialty? She asked. Me? Oh, I was a medic. Nothing too fancy. Lots of stitches and stuff like that, he said, not wanting to talk too much about the gory scenes he'd seen out in the jungle during dinner. Sounds important, she said. Yeah, I guess so, he said. If you need stitches, you need stitches. As Maria cleared the plates, the Sioux City Strangler moved to the green couch, which was just on the other side of the kitchen counter, and pulled a cigarette from his jacket pocket and went to light it. Hey, mind if I smoke? He asked. It's your place, not mine. Oh, no, go ahead, she said. Do you want another glass of wine? He hesitated. Got a beer, he asked. No big deal if you don't. I do, she said, sounding a little excited. She came back with 2 bottles and a pair of glasses. Honestly, I'm more of a beer girl than a wine girl. Hopefully my Italian ancestors aren't offended. They probably like beer too, he said. The pair sat on the sofa, their legs touching, talking about everything from football to food to work. He was surprised that she watched the games and enjoyed old westerns as much as he did. The fact that she had 3 brothers and was the only daughter in her family explained it. An hour of conversation flew by, and before long it was almost 10 p.m. Maria excused herself to freshen up, walking down the hall to the bathroom, closing the door gently behind her. Alone with his thoughts, the Sioux City Strangler contemplated his next move, reaching into his jacket pocket with his right hand to feel the coiled length of rope awaiting his decision. Stay tuned for more after this word from Green River Funeral Services.
Loved ones in your life can't live forever. They can live on in your heart with dignity, though. At Green River Funeral Services, we can help you ensure that the last memory friends and family members make of the deceased is one of elegance and decorum. With deluxe packages that include a mahogany and brass casket, we offer full-service preparations that can't be matched in the funeral industry. We can even help you find a final resting place for your loved one in a hurry if you don't have a plot picked out and purchased now. Contact us online or call 413-555-0118 to get more information about our full list of services.
The Sioux City Strangler sat there on the sofa, his hand in his jacket pocket, feeling the rough texture of the rope on his fingers. He looked around the room and took in an array of tchotchkes and decorative pillows and throw blankets. The space looked comfortable. He especially liked the small oil painting of a black Labrador fetching a tennis ball in a worn gold leaf frame on the wall. Deftly lighting another cigarette with his left hand, the Sioux City Strangler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The alcohol was starting to take hold just a little bit, he thought. 3 glasses of wine and 2 beers was a lot even on a full stomach. He smoked quietly, his eyes fixed on the oil painting of the dog. He wondered if it had been a family dog or some sort of flea market find. It wasn't a particularly good painting, but it had heart. Lost in a half-drunk daydream, the Sioux City Strangler thought of his old home again, the one where he'd grown up. It wasn't long before he was picturing his pet turtles and the fun they used to have in the dirt by the side of the house. Deep in thought, Maria's return startled the Sioux City Strangler, and he jumped just a little bit. He quickly withdrew his hand from his jacket pocket, tucking the rope further down toward the bottom to make sure she wouldn't see it. "Didn't you know I was still here?" she joked. Yeah, of course, sorry," he said, not offering any explanation. "Where did you go?" she asked, referring to the vacant expression on his face when she returned to the room. He had to think quickly. He wasn't going to talk about his fucked-up family anymore that night. "Well, it's silly," he said, working to force his face to smile just a little bit. "No, tell me," she said in a playful tone. "I want to know, really." "I was thinking about the dog on the wall." "The dog?" She seemed a little confused for a second. "Oh, the dog! The one in the painting?" "That very dog. Did you know that dog, or did you buy that painting?" "Oh boy," she said. "Are you ready for me to start crying?" Taken aback by the question, the Sioux City Strangler sat quietly, unsure of how to respond. He tried to force a smile, but he couldn't this time. "Oh," she said, "not like that. I just mean I really loved that dog. He was the best dog in the whole world." "So he was your dog?" asked the Sioux City Strangler, smiling for real now. "Yeah, that's Teddy. He was my dog when I was growing up." "You didn't think I'd actually pay money for that painting, did you?" she asked with a light sarcastic tone. I mean, it's got plenty of heart," he said. "I know it caught my attention." "Well, thank you, but I definitely would not pay money for that painting. No, I painted it when I was 15 or 16, right after Teddy died." "Oh, I'm sorry," he said in a somber, quiet voice. "Thanks. He had a good life, though. He was pretty old and wasn't doing so good anymore in the end. It's hard to watch, but it's comforting to know that he had lots of fun for lots of years." "Yeah," he said, "that's good." "He was a big fan of tennis balls, huh?" "Oh, this dog went crazy for tennis balls. Tennis balls were the most important thing in the world to Teddy." "That's really great. I never had a dog growing up," he said. "Oh, well, it's a lot of hard work, too. Lots of walks and messy cleanup." She tried to take on a reassuring tone. She was starting to sense that his childhood hadn't been very good at all. "I think I could have done all that. It would have been nice having a dog, I think." The Sioux City Strangler was staring at the painting without blinking. The cigarette in his hand had burned down to the butt and gone out. He hadn't taken a drag in several minutes. Maria noticed the ash that had fallen off the end and onto his suit. "Oh shit," he said, finally noticing the mess he'd made with his lit cigarette. "I'm sorry, I think I got some on your carpet." He dropped the cigarette into an empty beer bottle on the table as he said it. Maria just laughed. "Oh, please, nothing a little vacuuming won't fix. I'm due for some cleaning around here anyway." The Sioux City Strangler smiled. "I think it's pretty clean, other than the mess your dinner guest made." "Hey, can I use your bathroom?" he asked. "Of course," she said. "It's right down the hall. This place isn't very big, so I don't think you'll get lost. It's the one with the shower and sink." In the bathroom, the Sioux City Strangler sat on the edge of the bathtub, playing through a few different scenarios in his mind. He turned on the tap to buy himself a little extra time, dabbing the ash spot on his pant leg with a damp yellow washcloth. He could open the bathroom door, walk back into the living room, and take a seat on the couch, pulling the rope from his jacket pocket as he did it. She'd see it, but at that point it wouldn't matter. He could sit down beside her, pretending to rub her shoulders like he'd been working up the courage to make a move on her all night. She might protest, but she wouldn't do it right away. He'd have time to do what he came to do. Maybe he could even lure her out of the apartment after selling her some wild, spontaneous adventure. It was too late for dessert out, but he could pitch a nightcap at a bar or a scenic ride to a made-up spot he'd found. Once he got her in the car, he could drive her out toward the Lighthouse Inn and that overgrown field where he'd left Sherry the night before. As he thought of more ways to get Maria into his car, he heard a gentle knock on the door. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Do you need a towel to clean up your pants?" She wasn't sure what he'd needed, but he'd been in there a little too long. "Oh, nope, be right out," he said, waving his hands under the running water and turning it off. He dried his hands on the dry part of the yellow washcloth and opened the door. As he approached the living room, the Sioux City Strangler reached into his jacket pocket, feeling for the rope. As he turned the corner back into the main living area, he saw that Maria wasn't sitting on the sofa anymore. He looked to his left and saw Maria standing in the kitchen, filling 2 bowls with Seal-Test chocolate ice cream. "I know we had a big dinner, but I was in the mood for ice cream," she said. "Want some?" The Sioux City Strangler withdrew his hand from his jacket pocket. "I'd love some," he said. "Chocolate's my favorite flavor." Sioux City Strangler, the podcast, is a Past Due production and was recorded in sunny Los Angeles, California at Past Due Studios. This episode was written by Christopher Chase Godwin. Theme music was written and performed by Michael Wegner. Additional music was written and performed by Michael Wegner and Christopher Chase Godwin. Dialogue editing services were provided by Janet Berry. Additional editing by Karl Weiss at Past Due Studios. Learn more about the Sioux City Strangler by visiting SiouxCityStrangler.com and wearepastdue.com now. You can also find authentic Sioux City Strangler memorabilia, including posters, sturdy diner mugs, and rolling papers online. Don't forget to join the Sioux City Strangler fan club to get exclusive updates and access to limited edition items as well. New fan club members get a coupon code for 15% off on any order from the Past Due store. We need to thank our new sponsor, Fresh Fare Delivery, for helping us bring this episode to you. When you need a fast, easy meal in under 3 minutes, you need Fresh Fare Delivery in your fridge. We also have to thank Green River Funeral Services for their continued support. Make preparations for the afterlife by calling Green River Funeral Services or visiting them online today. Subscribe wherever you're listening now to hear episode 6 of Sioux City Strangler, the podcast, coming soon.